So before we begin, just please, this is my first time, so there's going to be mistakes. So please, with your blessings, I'll be able to speak properly on what I wanted to speak today. And I want to thank the community, Ramchandra Prabhu, Ramdosi Prabhu, everyone who gave me the opportunity to speak like this. So hopefully this will be more in the future. So in the simplest way today, our topic today will be on verse 4.8 from the Bhagavad-Gita. And we're going to be talking essentially the kind of mechanisms of how Krishna descends to the material world. So my goal today is kind of to start at a bird's eye point of view, and you're going to see me flipping a lot of pages. There's a lot of notes. But so we'll be starting from a bird's eye point of view and then kind of just digging deeper and deeper into what I want to talk about towards the end. So to begin with, let's broad scope, right? So in major religions and schools of thought around the world, there's some sort of explanation for the creation of the world, how it all began, and then how it will all eventually end, right? So in Christianity and some of its denominations, the most common belief is, first there was nothing, and then God said, let there be light, and that triggered the 7 days of creation. And that's mentioned in Genesis 1, I believe. And basically, over the course of 7 days, everything gets created. And then for the end, a lot of devout Christians believe in the second coming of Jesus Christ. And that happens in two phases. First phase being everyone who is a follower of Jesus Christ gets, pulled back into heaven with Christ. And eventually, Christ comes back down. And then he reigns for 1,000 years over the wicked, conquers the wicked, and then his devotees live in peace, and eventually they'll all go to heaven or hell with the final judgment. And then in Islam, it's similar to Christianity in the sense that in the beginning, God created everything, the heavens and the earths, and every single living entity in them. But their end is called the last judgment, or the last day. And the world ends, and the dead are resurrected and judged for all of their sins and deeds. And then they'll be shuffled off into heaven or hell. In Buddhism, however, they don't really care to know the details of how the universe was created. They understand or they accept that they won't ever fully understand how the universe was created and that it's unknowable, the origin, right? And then in one foundational story in Buddhism, Buddha refuses to answer the question from a follower about the origins of the universe, saying, and he said that the past and the future are unimportant when compared to liberating oneself from the suffering of the present. He tells the story of a man who refused to remove an arrow from his foot until he figured out who shot him. And by the time he figured out who actually shot him, he passed away. So Buddhism does teach that the universe is one of many, and it's a continuous cycle of being created and destroyed, and we shouldn't be worried about it. So the pattern of birth and death is eternal, and it's useless to point out a single beginning. However, in ISKCON, in Krishna consciousness, we know Krishna to be the supreme creator, the source of everything. He existed from the very beginning. He doesn't have a start, he's always been there. He created the spiritual world and the material world, and all the living entities emanated from him in one way or another. There's a multitude of laws and regulations and rules that kind of keep this infrastructure intact, right? A lot of his expansions and other living entities kind of populate all of the realms, and then things function as they should. There's no true beginning or end to the spiritual and material world, because the cycles of rebirth continue on, and souls will eternally be either in the material world suffering, or they'll gain liberation and go back to the spiritual world, and vice versa if you fall back down again. So this might have been just like a crash course in world religions, but the point I'm trying to make here is that in most religions, there's a clear start and an end, and the end usually involves God finally coming back down in one way or another, and casting a final judgment on people, and then people will always either go to heaven or hell forever and ever. So in these perspectives and the other perspectives, other than ISKCON, it's a bit distancing, right? So God happens to come in the beginning. He does his thing, he creates some stuff, and he disappears. until the very end, and they'll come back again and be like, okay, so what were you up to? I guess we'll just judge you now and figure out what you've been doing all this time, right? And it's off-putting, to be honest. And that kind of, there's no heavy emphasis on God himself coming down himself to lend a guiding hand to people and make sure people are on the right track. And a lot of those times, this lack of continuous presence by God himself puts off a lot of atheists and helps them convert to atheism because they have a lot of disdain for supernatural entities or things like that that don't seem like they're taking responsibility for their creation. So in ISKCON, however, we know that Krishna is a supreme controller, creator, maintainer. He's always involved, right? He's all pervading throughout the universe and exists in many forms and repeatedly comes onto the material world multiple times, right? Through the yugas. So he's not the type of father that lets his children figure it out in the deep end of the swimming pool. He'll lend a hand every once in a while, give a floaty here and there, make sure you don't drown. So he comes again and again for the pure benefit of the devotees and their pleasure. So now we'll finally transition into our verse for today. So it's verse 4.8 from the Bhagavad-Gita. You guys can repeat after me. Paritanaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Does everyone want to repeat? Or you just skip?
Paritanaya
sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritanaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Alright, thank you. So we'll go on to kind of synonyms translation. Let's do synonyms. Okay, Paritanaya for the deliverance, sadhunam of the devotees, vinashaya for the annihilation, cha and dushkritam of the miscreants, dharma principles of religion, samsthapanarthaya to reestablish, sambhavami I do appear, yuge millennium, yuge after millennium. Translation and Bhagavad-Gita. To deliver the pious and to annihilate the miscreants, as well as to reestablish the principles of religion, I myself appear millennium after millennium. So according to the Bhagavad-Gita, a sadhu or holy man is a man in Krishna consciousness. A person may appear to be irreligious, but if he has the qualifications of Krishna consciousness, wholly and fully, he is to be understood to be a sadhu. And duskritam applies to those who do not care for Krishna consciousness. Such miscreants, or duskritam, are described as foolish and the lowest of mankind, even though they may be decorated with mundane education. Whereas a person who is 100% engaged in Krishna consciousness is accepted as a sadhu, even though such a person may be neither learned nor well-cultured. As far as the atheistic are concerned, it is not necessary for the Supreme Lord to appear as he is to destroy them, as he did with the demons, Ravana and Kamsa. The Lord has many agents who are quite competent to vanquish demons, but the Lord especially descends to appease his unalloyed devotees, who are always harassed by the demoniac. The demon harasses the devotee, even though the latter may happen to be his kin. Although Prahlad Maharaj was the son of Hiranyakashipu, he was nonetheless persecuted by his father. Although Devaki, the mother of Krishna, was the sister of Kamsa, she and her husband Vasudeva were persecuted only because Krishna was to be born of them. So Lord Krishna appeared primarily to deliver Devaki rather than kill Kamsa, but both were performed simultaneously. Therefore, it is said that to deliver the devotee and vanquish the demon miscreants, the Lord appears in different incarnations. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita of Krishnadas Kaviraj, the following verses summarize these principles of incarnation. The avatar, or the incarnation of Godhead, descends from the kingdom of God for material manifestation. And the particular form of the personality of Godhead, who so descends, is called an incarnation, or avatar. Such incarnations are situated in the spiritual world, the kingdom of God. When they descend to the material creation, they assume the name avatar. There are various kinds of avatars, such as Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, Lila avatars, Saktya Vesha avatars, Manvatara avatars, Yuga avatars, all appearing on schedule all over the universe. But Lord Krishna is the primeval Lord, the fountainhead of all avatars. Lord Shri Krishna descends for the specific purpose of mitigating the anxieties of the pure devotees, who are very anxious to see him in his original Vrindavana pastimes. Therefore, the prime purpose of the Krishna avatar is to satisfy his unalloyed devotees. The Lord says that he incarnates himself in every millennium. This indicates that he incarnates also in the age of Kali. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the incarnation in the age of Kali is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who spread the worship of Krishna by the Sankirtan movement, which is congregational chanting of the holy names, and spread Krishna consciousness throughout India. He predicted that this culture of Sankirtan would be broadcast all over the world, from town to town and village to village. Lord Chaitanya, as the incarnation of Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is described secretly, but not directly, in the confidential parts of the revealed scriptures, such as the Upanishads, Mahabharata, and Bhagavatam. The devotees of the Lord Krishna are very much attracted by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. This avatar of the Lord does not kill the miscreants, but delivers them by his causeless mercy. Okay. So to reiterate, right, the translation says that Krishna appears millennium after millennium under very specific circumstances. One is to deliver the pious, two is to annihilate the miscreants, and three is to establish the principles of religion. So the pious, as we read, refers to the sadhus or the holy men that are in Krishna consciousness, fully dedicated. And the miscreants are those who are not following Krishna consciousness, who aren't following the laws of nature, the laws of God, which are basically the same thing since Krishna is the one who created the universe. So they have some level of denial about the truth of the universe, that Krishna is the supreme creator, and most of the time, miscreants refer to very anti-religion or demoniac people that Krishna would have to personally come himself to annihilate, right? So as they said, like, they won't come for like petty crimes like atheists and stuff. So, and then to reestablish the principles of religion refers to kind of the dharma of the soul, right? So our dharma as a spiritual soul is that we are the soul, not the body, and our true purpose in life is to serve Krishna and please him. So when the majority of people start forgetting this dharma, then Krishna also appears in order to reestablish this dharma, the principles. Okay. So the three items we're gonna cover today, like overall arching topics, are the types of avatars that were mentioned. Why do we need to know anything about the avatars, and what does it mean for us specifically, individually? So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So for the first kind of avatar mentioned is the Purusha avatars. So yeah, so if you remember in the verse, Shri mentions, he kind of just jots down like 5 or 6 different types of avatars. He doesn't go into detail about it, probably because he's word count and stuff like that. But it is explained deeply in the Madhya Lila of Charitamrita, in chapter 20. So if you do want to explore this, you can read that chapter. Oops. So the Purusha avatars refer to the incarnations of Vishnu, right? Some of you have probably already know all of this, so let's treat it as a review, right? So Vishnu, there's 3 notable incarnations or forms of Vishnu called Purushas. First is the Mahavishnu form, who is the creator of all the material energy. So with every breath he takes, every exhale, he creates universes from all his pores. And then with every inhale, he destroys them by intaking them into his body. And this is over and over again, innumerable amount of universes, right? Repetition all the time, never stops. The second incarnation is Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, who is situated inside every one of these little universes. From him sprouts the lotus flower from which Brahma is born, and Brahma helps create the 14 worlds of that universe and maintains it with Vishnu. And the third is Kshirodakshaya Vishnu, who is the Vishnu that, or part of Krishna that resides in the heart of every living entity. So people kind of forget, or, it's easy to understand it, but it's also important to know that because Krishna exists through these Purusha avatars and all these facets of the creation, it's important to remember he is everywhere all the time. So he's not just appearing here and there, right? So these kind of incarnations show the stability of Krishna's presence throughout the creation. Next is the Guna avatars, the incarnations or representations of Krishna that control the material qualities, right? So the 3 functions are, creation, maintenance, destruction. That's in every part of the material world. So he channels his control over the mode of passion through Lord Brahma. Brahma is considered a devotee incarnation that engineers the entire universe. Usually it's another soul that's imbued with the power of Krishna in order to create that universe. But sometimes if there's no one who's qualified, Krishna will himself step in as Brahma, expand into that role. So, and then he manifests his role over ignorance through Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva isn't affected by the mode, but he decides to control over it and associate with it. But since he's a pure devotee, he will not be affected by that mode entirely. Krishna's control over goodness is through Lord Vishnu within that universe, and he helps maintain the universe. So it's important to note that Brahma and Shiva are both devotee incarnations who carry out orders, and Lord Vishnu, the maintainer, is the personal expansion of Lord Krishna, for the most part. Leela avatars is something that probably jumps to your mind immediately when you think of avatars. These are the incarnations meant for the performance of pastimes. So these incarnations tend to be Krishna's response to devotees in distress or to irreligion within the universe. So when the whole world was being flooded, Matsya came into being, the incarnation, the fish incarnation, to protect King Satyavrata and his devotees and eventually give the king transcendental knowledge. And then when the demigods and the demons were churning the ocean of milk, Krishna came as the Kurma avatar, the tortoise avatar, to help stabilize the hill so they can churn the nectar out of it. He also came as Mohini in that specific pastime in order to distract the demons so that the demigods could take the nectar, right? So in this case, he was helping them perform a feat and let the good side win. Both of these were very supportive roles, right? We have Varaha and Nrsimhadev, who are very, they come in the mode of anger for the most part. They're very, there was extreme levels of distress. And, in the first scenario for Varaha, the earth was shifted from its orbit and thrown into the ocean, the Garbhodakshaya ocean, and the form that appeared was the wild boar Varaha in order to rescue the earth and kill the demon Hiranyaksha. And then Prahlad Maharaj, who is the son of Hiranyakashipu. If any of you were here last week, you've seen the pastime played out by the kids in Sunday school. So that was also another reaction to a devotee in distress. Hiranyakashipu had been terrorizing the entire universe, but the kind of like breaking point was Prahlad Maharaj being in danger from his father. So Nrsimhadev was able to appear, and he exploited the loophole that was in the immortality boon that Hiranyakashipu had been given from Brahma. Then we have Vamandev. Krishna came in the form of a half-dwarf to deliver Bali Maharaj, who was the grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. And he was the king of demons, and this was relatively not a super violence-filled pastime, but the main purpose here was to help deliver Bali Maharaj. And then we have Parshuram, who this one was very violence-filled. The world became saturated with evil kings and demons and kshatriyas who were not following their duty. And Parshuram, through the pastime, was able to kill them all, and he kind of went over the world 21 times or so, continuously killing all the evil ones to kind of cleanse the world. And then eventually he came as Ram, and then this is where we kind of see there's an alternate purpose, right? So Ram had come to help, kill the demons, especially Ravana and things like that. But his existence as a king served as an example for future generations on what the perfect king should be like. He set an example for how a king should behave and how a king should act in times of distress and in times of peace. And he was used as an example for future generations. Krishna and Balaram together came, Krishna as himself, and then Balaram as another kind of expansion of Krishna. And they came to enact pastimes to please the devotees who desired the association of them and to rid the world and liberate them of demons. He also reestablished religion and its principles by speaking the Bhagavad-Gita on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And then we have Buddha. Some people don't want to consider Buddha as like a Leela avatar. Rather, he can fall into one of the other categories we'll discuss today, but I just put him here because we tend to see him in these lists of incarnations. But Buddha also came at a time where people were increasingly violent and misusing the religious texts for personal gain to preach the value of ahimsa or nonviolence, and to follow his example rather than the Vedas. So this is one of the very few times that Krishna will explicitly not promote religious texts or books and their teachings, and this is honestly just because of the toxic environment that was occurring at the time, where people were misinterpreting the text for their own personal gain and not using the text in a proper way in order to keep continuing violence against animals and other human beings. So Buddha came as a kind of, to set another example, basically, in the same line as Lord Ram. But Buddha set an example that people could follow without having to refer to the religious text that people were misusing. Then Lord Chaitanya came, only a couple hundred years ago, very close to our time frame, compared to everyone else. So Lord Chaitanya isn't explicitly mentioned in the Bhagavatam, but it's kind of hinted at. But it happened, thankfully, in our lifetime, So the avatar came explicitly to establish the Sankirtan movement and spread the Supreme Lord's holy name. He gave the world a very easy way in order to achieve spiritual perfection, and his very life became the example of a pure devotee. Lord Chaitanya is Krishna in the mood of Radharani, right? So by following his example, or attempting to even follow a little bit of his example, a little bit of his footsteps, we'll gain a lot of mercy from him and become even better devotees than we are right now. And this avatar was specifically he didn't come at all to kill any miscreants or demons. He came specifically to deliver anyone and everyone with his causeless mercy. And the only incarnation that hasn't appeared yet so far is Kalki. So Kali Yuga lasts for about 432,000 years. We're only a few thousand in. It's nowhere near our lifetime. So people and principles eventually degrade as the Yuga goes on, and Kalki will appear with the power of Krishna, or Krishna will appear in the form of Kalki to rescue the devotees and protect religious principles. He'll basically like kill, chop down everyone who isn't like a devotee, or all the demoniac people, and purify the innocent, and that triggers the beginning of a new Yuga, Satya Yuga, or the Golden Yuga. And then now we have another category of avatars called the Shakti-Avesha avatars. These are incarnations of empowered living entities. So these are individuals or entities that get imbued with the power of Krishna or one of his potencies, and sometimes Buddha falls into this category as well. So in this case, the empowered can fall into two categories. They're usually called primary and secondary. The primaries in this category are people who are, or entities that are directly empowered by or the Lord, or are direct expansions of the Lord. The secondaries are indirectly powered, and the Lord invests some power in them so they can represent the Lord. They're essentially equivalent, but it's just kind of like the nitty-gritty of it. So examples of primaries would be like Lord Sesha in the spiritual world, and Lord in the spiritual world of Vaikuntha, and Lord Ananta in the material world. And then others that would fall in the Shakti-Avesha avatar category would be the four Kumaras, Narada, Lord Brahma, when he's not Krishna himself, Lord Parshuram, King Prithu. That's only to name a few. There's countless numbers of people that can fall into this category. And anytime the Lord makes himself present by investing his potencies, so you can probably categorize a lot of these avatars based on what potency is present most in them, right? So say for the four Kumaras, it would be the potency of his knowledge, right? For others, it would be the potency of following or doing devotional service, the potency of being able to create, like Brahma, strength, the power to rule, etc., etc. So that living entity that has some sort of potency within them from Lord Krishna can be considered as one of these kinds of incarnations. And then we have the Manvantara avatars. So these incarnations number many, and they appear during the reign of each Manu, right? So in one day of Brahma, there's 14 Manus, and during each of those 14 Manus, there's an incarnation that manifests by the grace of the Lord, right? So in the course of one Brahma's lifetime, there's over 500,000 avatars, and this is only for one universe. They all have different names according to which Manvantara they're in. It's a lot of information that's kind of overload, to be honest, more than what's happening right now. And so the purpose of the Manvantara avatar incarnations are to chastise miscreant rulers of different planets with as much power as that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who punishes miscreants with his own weapons, his wheel weapon. So they also exist to glorify and spread the glories of the Lord. Once again, chapter 20, if you want to read more about it. Then we have the final category, which is the Yuga avatars, which are incarnations that appear in different millenniums. So they appear specifically in order to establish principles for that specific Yuga, right? So for the four Yugas, Satya, Treta, Dwapar, Kali, the Lord incarnates in four colors, so to speak, right? So white for Satya, red for Treta, blackish for Dwapar, and yellow for Kali. So in the Satya Yuga, a white avatar appears to Kardama Muni to help establish meditation as the primary process, the best process for self-realization for that Yuga. Then in Treta Yuga, a reddish avatar appears to Brahma to help manifest the entirety of Vedic knowledge and establish fire sacrifice, or yajnas, as the primary process for self-realization. In the Dwapar Yuga, we see Krishna appear, a dark blackish avatar, appear as the son of Devaki to help establish deity worship as the primary process of self-realization. And then finally, in Kali Yuga, a yellowish avatar appears, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as the son of Sachimata to help establish chanting as a primary process for self-realization, or Nam Sankirtan. The last two were not explicitly named, but with our clues, we figured it out. And then, so, that kind of concludes the rundown of all of the avatars. So why do we want to know anything about this? Why did I spend the last 30 minutes talking about this? A lot of these stories and pastimes of these incarnations are, really great, like bedtime stories or easy ways to teach lessons and morals of how Krishna operates in the material world, right? But I think the overarching sentiment that can be summarized to kind of help summarize what we just went over is something I read in a book many years ago, actually. In that book, the main character, the narrator, is death personified, and it's during the Holocaust. So a lot of the times when death has monologues throughout the book, it's a lot of the sentences kind of ring true a little bit for, because it's the closest we get to a god in that book. So a lot of the sentences often sound like something, I would imagine Krishna would say, or I would read in the Bhagavad-Gita. So the specific quote would be, I have the endless ability to be in the right place at the right time. It almost sounds like something Krishna would say, right? So all of these innumerable avatars and expansions, some continuously existing like the Vishnus, and then others appearing only when certain conditions are met. All of them are part of Krishna's plan. He appears for a reason at the right time, at the right place, for the right circumstance. So Krishna has an arsenal of ways to involve himself in the material world, despite being entirely spiritual in nature. So he descends to these realms for many reasons, as we've kind of glanced upon through all the explanations we've done so far. So his continuous development, or involvement rather, as expansions and by empowering others, he helps maintain the universe's infrastructure, handling the cycle of creation and destruction, establishing the laws that keep these universes intact and running as they should. This is to maintain a place that his fallen souls can seek their selfish desires and run through the course of action and reaction until they can come back to him and realize that that's their true place. He also descends to help soothe the distress of his devotees when miscreants increase in number and terrorize the inhabitants of the world. He also descends to reestablish the principles of religion due to time, place, and circumstance, era after era. He doesn't abandon his devotees. He does his best to alter the principles and emphasize practices that are easiest for the time, so that we can easily go back to him, back to Godhead. And what we need to understand from all of this is that Krishna is always making an effort in some way or another. He doesn't wash his hands of his creation and just wait for it to run its course, only to make judgments at the end. He's constantly participating and guiding us all, like how a gardener actively checks in on their plants, nurtures them, waters them, guides their growth, takes care of pests when they become rampant. He's always listening to the needs of his devotees. He caters his expansions and incarnations to the situation, like how Matsya came as a fish to help rescue them from floods, or how Narasimhadev was specifically in the form that exploited the loophole in the boon of immortality that was granted to Hiranyakashipu. He'll come in different moods according to the situation, whether as a supportive avatar, in anger, or with mercy. He never holds back and gives it all, especially when his devotees need him or ask of it from him. His primary concern is always the pleasure and safety of his devotees. And that's all good to know, right? Like Krishna loves his devotees, he'll calm down when it gets really bad and save us all. And, like the heroes of the epics, they come, they usher in new ages of peace and religion, and all is good and well. But what does that mean for us specifically? We started today, this talk, kind of at the largest, like the bird's eye point of view, right? Talking about how religions other religions viewed their creator's role in their world. And how ISKCON, Krishna consciousness, shows us a Supreme Lord who's kind of elbows deep in everything, using his expansions, himself, and constantly being present in all parts of the creation. But when it's finally time to kind of narrow it down completely to the individual level. So what does it mean for you, for me, for all of us individuals suffering in the material world, right? Especially in a time between incarnations, between avatars. Krishna appeared only a couple hundred years ago. He's not going to come for another couple 100,000 years from now. So what do we do in the meanwhile? So Krishna helps us on the individual level too, right? So Krishna is accomplishing all these feats of grandeur on like a universal scale, on a world scale, but he's also doing it for us on the individual level too, for any of us who accept him and his teachings. We have lust, anger, envy, greed, pride, and illusion. All of these demons are already within our hearts. And Krishna came to speak the Gita, and anyone who hears and follows the Gita, the words of the Gita, these demons within our heart can be vanquished, right? So as a side note, it's important to note that the presence of these obstacles and demons in our lives isn't a byproduct of an imperfect creation, right? It's not just God being negligent, of Krishna just forgetting to deal with it. But it's entirely necessary for us. Without it, we'll get complacent, right? This isn't a vacation spot, this is the material world, it's a prison. So as difficult as it sounds, we should be able to thank Krishna in times of extreme distress for reminding us, for sending us reminders that when something is disturbing us or hindering our progress, that we can use that reminder to realign our motivations, regain our confidence, and reaffirm our spiritual devotion to him and continue our service. So Krishna is our savior, but through his example, we know that we can do the same, but on a minor scale. So lots of people already try to follow these kinds of principles on a material level, right? So that's people who help the needy or the poor by donating their time or service, people who get involved in maintaining justice for others by working in like the court system, law enforcement, the government. But all that effort goes into very temporary solutions. So the suffering here in the material world is the only thing that will never change. So we need to redirect these desires and these directives into a spiritual framework in order to properly help ourselves and everyone around us. His Holiness Ramdas Swami says to deliver the cause of the Lord and preach his names and glories in order to purify our own hearts, to live with integrity, because the greatest act of compassion a person can do in the world is to be a good example for others to follow. So develop your integrity, be truthful and willing to make sacrifices for the sake of others, regardless of who you are or what your status is. Krishna teaches us that everyone can do that, and in doing that, we can express our intent to love God by loving others. And simply by that intent, the Lord reciprocates and gradually awakens that love within our heart. So put in the work to make ourselves better, and that's how we help ourselves and how we help others around us. And that's how we also show that we're willing to put the effort, to reciprocate the effort that Krishna is putting in. And by conquering of our demons and inner struggles and readying ourselves to surrender to him is a very difficult task. And we can do our best by, chanting, hearing, associating with devotees, worshiping him, carrying out the orders of the Lord, surrendering to him. But these are ways that one can directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We also know that we're doing well in our devotional service if the devotees around us are pleased by a service. And who is one of the most important references we can use? We talked about all the ways Krishna expands himself and invests his potencies in beings so that they can act as his representatives. So who haven't I mentioned yet? Who is the most accessible representative of God for us? Yeah, the Guru. Thank you. For many of us, it's Srila Prabhupada, and for others, it's one of his disciples. And verse 7 of the Guru Astakam explains this very well. Sakshadaritvena samasta shastra yuktastata bhavyate vasabdi kintu prabhu ya vyayeva tasya vande guru Sri Sharanarvindam. So the spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hari. We should accept the Guru as God himself, as he is the external manifestation of God. It's the closest person we have to Krishna, so we need to make use of that. So use your Guru as your reference point, and know that if you're pleasing the Guru, you're pleasing Krishna. So we've reached the end, so you can rejoice. Thank you for sticking that long. And if any of you use Reddit or forums, you've probably seen the acronym TLDR, which is like too long, didn't read, and it's a summary at the end. So I've adapted to too long, didn't pay attention. So if you haven't been paying attention, you finally checked in right now. This is great because these are the last points I want you to get out of this, even if you weren't listening for the past hour, right? As long as you get these points, I did my job today. So Krishna, to begin with, right? So Krishna is actively involved in the creation through his multitude of incarnations and expansions. We need to understand that Krishna is making the effort to be involved and watching out for his devotees. He cares for us, and he's always with us in one way or another. We've just been making ourselves blind or ignoring that fact and wondering why he isn't giving us answers or being in our lives consistently or making himself visible to us. So he's been making the effort all this time, continuously. So that means we need to make the effort too, so that we can meet him at least quarter way, if not halfway, right? And show him our appreciation and devotion. Our relationship with Krishna is meant to be a reciprocal one, and he's been doing a lot of work on his end to keep this relationship alive and kicking, right? So it's time for us to put the same amount of effort in, if not even a little bit more than we are right now, so we can help maintain this reciprocal relationship, right? So we need to make use of the fortune we've gotten in this life, this this human body that we've received, and fully commit to ourselves to Krishna, his teachings, our Guru, and our devotional service, right? So, and with that, I'll end it for now. I apologize for any inaccuracies or mistakes, but I welcome questions and feedback. So thank you, everyone, for your help.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. That was a very wonderful presentation, very nicely summarized. So, going to the verse, back to the verse that why he appears for the three reasons. One is to annihilate the demons and reestablish religion. So what we see, what's happening in Ukraine today, right? Such a big, this war, unnecessary war, and some people getting killed. So the question arises that why in this time, where is Krishna? Why isn't he appearing? That's the question.
Right. So this kind of loops back into kind of any other incarnations of Krishna, right? For as many people who were aware of Krishna's presence during that specific pastime, there's just as many people who were blind to his presence, right? Who didn't understand that they were looking at Krishna himself. So that could be one scenario where, we're so pigeonholed into the idea of what we think Krishna would appear as if he came, that we kind of forget his presence in everyone around us. He makes his presence known, right? So the conflict in Ukraine is very unfortunate. It escalated for reasons that could have been prevented, in my opinion, but as the world works, things go out of our control and the governments kind of mess up and things like that. It's not up to us to kind of determine if a disaster or a conflict is severe enough to, call for Krishna's help. But in this case, I think we need to learn to see Krishna and his potencies in other people around us. and see that we also have a little bit of his potency and that we have the ability to help in whatever way we can, whether that's donating to the ISKCON, the Food for Life programs, or helping the Ukraine devotees or the other refugees there and things like that. So I'm not sure if I answered it completely, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the good presentation and very enlightening. The question is, you mentioned that Parshuram was incarnated, so there was a lot of miseries were there. But I think, if you look at the timeline, it happened before Treta Yuga.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the yuga name?
Satya? I mean, someone can check me on that. I don't remember exactly, but
So I think like as I have heard, like Satyuga is purely like most of the people are pious and devotees, right? There is no misdeeds or like evil thoughts or something.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the story behind it? Like
I mean, it's also important to remember is the material world, right? There's no absolutes in this world. So even if a majority of people are pious, there's probably just as much potential for impious people and demoniac people to kind of develop and gain power, right? So regardless of what yuga it is, that kind of explosion of violence or impious actions or demoniac people, it's always possible, right? They just happen in different ways or different scales. So I don't think the yuga itself, there's no such thing as a perfect yuga. It's known as like the golden yuga, like Satya Yuga, like eventually it like degrades, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not perfect because we exist in the material world.
But it happened before Treta Yuga?
I cannot say for sure, like it's like escaping my mind, but regardless, there's been incarnations of Krishna coming in every yuga in order to deliver his devotees and save them from some sort of, distress. So no yuga is safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. It was a great session.
Oh, thank you.
So I have a question. So it feels like what I heard from you said that it feels like every yoga has to get to a certain level where the misdeeds and the miscreants have to really become so big and powerful and huge that it just beckons Krishna to come down.
Yeah.
So it feels like we're just the beginning stages of Kali Yuga
Yeah.
to be able to come to the next place. So I just wanted to clarify that, right? It feels like that's what it is. And second, I heard you say that, in the yugas, Krishna takes form in different colors, right? So is it Kalki, Prabhu is going to be in the form of like yellow color, or would you say it's
so
like blue?
That specific slide had to do specifically with the yuga avatars, right? So the yuga avatars, they come in each like yuga, but their main purpose is to help establish the religious principle that's the primary like thing they should follow for that yuga, right? So Kalki is an incarnation that's coming for kind of like the final destruction kind of thing, where he's just kind of like saving the last of the good ones and then killing all the demoniac ones and helping usher in the new age, basically. So the Yuga Avatar, the ones that are color-coded, are specifically to help establish the religious principles. So for this Yuga, it was yellow, right? So Kali Yuga. And yellow referred to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who already appeared a couple hundred years ago. So he came to establish chanting as the primary directive for self-realization. Does that help clear it up? I mean, you could follow up.
Yeah, so what does the scripture say what's going to happen after Kalki's?
Oh, after Kalki, it will start another cycle, right? So Satya Yuga again, yeah. It's never ending. How did you go ahead?
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. It was very nice.
Thank you.
And
Can you give an example of which avatar was white and red in Satyuga and Treta?
Yeah. I personally wasn't. I was going through like the chapter 20, right, of Madhyalila, and I wasn't able to see specific names for the reddish avatar and the whitish avatar. They were just kind of described in how they look or who they were born, like stuff like that. But anyone else here can correct me. I'm sure like someone's named them at least somewhere. I've only seen names for the blackish and the yellowish since it's like kind of obvious to us like in hindsight, right? So, yeah.
Light is Musa.
Did you know there were red one too, or?
More incarnation also there is.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. Alright, thank you.
So just to answer the Parshuram question.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that there wasn't evil in other times. It's that the evil was Maha evil. Just like now we live for 100 years. That time we lived for 10,000 years, 100,000 years. Ravan also was there at that time, right? Ram came. But they were Maha, 1 million times Hitler, something like that, right? And Parshuram also appeared in Treta Yuga, but not the Treta Yuga that we are in now. So Treta Yuga has happened many times. So he was in the 19th Treta Yuga. Lord Ramchandra appeared in the 24th Treta Yuga, much later. And Parshuram is Chiranjeevi. He's one of the Chiranjeevis. He's still there, he's still here. So as these cycles keep coming 1,000 times, the 4 yugas keep cycling, they are here. Parshuram is here and so are the other Chiranjeevis also. So when Bhagavatam speaks about yugas, it's not just these 4. It could have happened many before, Satyugas before.
This has happened multiple times already?
It could have happened multiple times, one time. It could have happened in this universe, it could have happened in other universes also. So Krishna's pastimes are happening not in our only universe, it's happening in many of the universes. So which one are we talking about? For example, the same scriptures that are here in other universes with many more verses are there. Remember that we are in this small universe, which is the smallest. Our Brahma has 4 heads. There are other universes where Brahma has hundreds and thousands of heads. So similarly, their scriptures are also, there's more information, there's more leelas, more past. Everything is more in those. It's beyond our conception.
Thank you everyone for listening so patiently.